Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone. Welcome to the latest edition of the Rider Rumblings video podcast. We haven't done one for a while. Actually, this is the first one of 2022. So happy New Year, happy February. I am here with our venerable football writer, Murray McCormick, and his various forms of Pittsburgh Steelers paraphernalia. There's a Terry Bradshaw jersey in the back. I don't see any Cliff Stout jerseys or Mark Malone jerseys anywhere, but
no, I do have I think I have a Bubby Brister thing or action figure somewhere.
I had a Denver Broncos Bubby Brister jersey. Somebody got it for me once as a gag. So
it was a bit of a gag.
Well, we've got a little bit to talk about, and some of this may be rendered old news pretty quickly if there's signings coming up during the free agent, or not signings necessarily, but if there are some marriages of players and teams that come up during the free agent period. We're going to try and preview it, recognizing that things aren't necessarily static in the free agent world. But Murray, you're doing a big story for Wednesday's paper on just previewing the free agency period. What do you expect? What do you think? If you could look into your crystal ball and shift your gaze away from the Bubby Brister jersey and kind of project what we'll be talking about a week from now when free agency goes crazy on day one. What do you think are the most likely outcomes of some of the situations that are most pertinent to the Rough Riders?
First off, it may not be in Wednesday's paper. It'll probably be, let's just say it'll be later this week. How's that? For that
Thursday's paper. My brain is,
we'll get around to it because we have a bit of time. I think we're going to see good size money go to non-quarterback positions, which will be a real change. I think teams are recognizing that Kenny Lawler and these receivers and Duke Williams are pretty good guys to spend some money on, and they maybe just start rewarding them. Because remember that, I think it was 19 when all the quarterback money was spent.
Yeah, and that was like, it was $700,000 was the ceiling, and we're seeing that shift. So there is a market correction taking place, and not to the benefit of quarterbacks.
No, I think it's gonna the other players like offensive linemen and stuff. And I think if guys are holding out, I think, and let's say we sign now. And it's interesting because, and it's always a frustrating part. And as well, we don't hear the figures in the salaries, even though the salary cap is out there. You always kind of wonder, why don't they tell the salaries, give you a better idea? Maybe it's an embarrassment level, some of them, because they don't make as much money as you think, and others make more than you do. But I do see a correction coming, and I kind of hope. I think the players deserve a little more money this year. I think they bit the bullet last year on a prorated salary over 14 games, and I think they deserve a little bit of money back. And I think they're all expecting it, and I think they're hoping that free agency produces that.
But I mean, it's what goes in one player's pocket comes out of another player's pocket with a cap. I mean, the overall remuneration will be what it's going to be. The interesting thing here, though, is that the CBA is up in the spring. Pardon me.
Isn't it always up in the spring?
Once again, we've got another free agency period, and the teams don't know exactly what the cap's going to be. This is absurd. The other thing is, last year teams did not spend to the cap.
Right.
What is the directive for this year? Do we know?
And why would they spend to the cap this year, Rob? Like, what has changed other than they played a shortened season, and other than the Riders and the Bombers, you've not heard anything good about financials on any other teams. And even the Riders, and good is a sort of subjective term, but they don't think they're going to lose as much.
Well, I think you spend to the cap if you're the Saskatchewan Rough Riders because you got a Grey Cup in Regina this year. And if you are not spending every cent that you can spend, considering what Brendan Taman did in 2013, and going just marginally over about $17,000, big deal, then are you doing your fans a disservice? If you're spending $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 under the cap with a Grey Cup here, with a new stadium here, first Grey Cup in a new stadium, with a team that's finished first, that's had 3 straight home playoff games. The one thing they haven't done is get to the Grey Cup, and now you've got that opportunity in the Grey Cups at home, and you can do what the Los Angeles Rams are doing this year. If you don't spend every cent you can spend, you are doing your fans a disservice. Now, how will that fly with the other teams? But if you're Jeremy O'Day, you better spend what you're available to spend, because if if you win a Grey Cup here, you'll make that back in 10 seconds in merchandise.
That's true, but also you still have to look at, and what happens if you spend all that money and don't get to the Grey Cup? Because that's not guaranteed.
You better try. You better try. If you spend all that money and don't get to the Grey Cup, at least you tried. But if let's say you spend $300,000 or $400,000 less in the cap and you don't get there, and you're wondering, well, I had some bullets in the chamber that I didn't fire. Maybe I should have done that. Honestly, Jeremy O'Day will be under major heat if they don't pull out every stop available, at every stop at their disposal to get there. There's no justification for spending less than the cap.
Okay, but what about just throwing this out? What about the future though? Like, do you blow your budget for 24? Do you blow?
You're not blowing the budget. You're allowed to spend it.
Yeah.
And what's the point of negotiating a salary cap with the players if you're not going to spend that money on the players? That's my grievance, and that was my grievance last year. And I'm surprised the Players Association didn't make a bigger deal out of it, because the teams are coming out and saying we're not paying the players everything that we can pay the players, and they've taken enough hits as it is over the last 2 years, and now you're spending not necessarily to the floor, but probably closer to the floor than the ceiling. And I don't know. They're your product.
Do you think they have all sorts of money now, Rob? Do you think there's a bottomless pit of money in this CFL? Or do you think they're dealing with big time debt and hangover leftover? Because they still got to account for money that was spent in 2020 that didn't.
Yeah, but you got to put a product on the field, and you've got a TSN contract that pretty much handles
the salary
underwrites most of your player payroll. So if you're going to cut corners, you don't cut corners with your players. You cut corners with let's not, maybe our CEO doesn't need to make quite as much. There's some low-hanging fruit there that can be trimmed. Coaches' salaries. In what other league do coaches make more money than most of the players? It's the inverse if you're looking at the National Hockey League, if you're looking at the National Football League, the NBA. But here, if you're looking at a coach making 300 plus, a GM making 300 plus, unless you're a quarterback, you're not making 300 plus. So the coaches and GMs are making more money than 90%, 95% of the players in the league.
And
so if you're
guaranteed.
and it's guaranteed. So if you're talking about a market correction, that's where you correct the market. If you're looking to trim some fat, don't trim the fat from the players who are putting their livelihood on the line every time they go out there in a very violent sport. You trim the fat by maybe not paying your CEO as much, maybe not paying your vice president of whatever as much, and turn that money over to the players.
Well, ideally that would be the way it works, and realistically it doesn't work that way. I don't think, but that's a good way, and I hope they listen to it. Maybe that'll be the way to go. I think the way the free agent is going to work, I'm interesting to see how much money they actually spend. Like, you've heard the rumors of Kenny Lawler from Winnipeg, $250,000, the second highest paid, the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. Do you think he's worth that one season?
Well, if Lucky Whitehead on the basis of one really good season is worth 200, then you can probably justify. Honestly, again, this is a bit of the market being skewed, but you don't even blink if you see a Canadian offensive lineman making in the high 100s or low 200s. Yeah. And so why not pay someone who can actually score a touchdown that kind of money? I realize we're talking about the ratio, but Kenny Lawler is the kind of player that people will show up and watch. He's exciting. But nobody's going to pay that kind of money thinking, oh, gee, I'm wondering if the left guard will get to the second level and eliminate the linebacker so that, they're the show.
None of that happens if you don't have, and we found out last year that doesn't happen if you don't have a great offensive line either.
Yeah, but if you don't, if you have a salary cap and you're not spending at least close to it, what's the point of negotiating that figure? And now there's a prospect of a full season. So, we're talking about the era where there is single game betting, and presumably there's some revenues to be derived from that. But by all means, spend what you can on the players, not just here but everywhere. They've taken enough hits.
I do, and I think the players deserve more. I think they really do, and maybe that's why we're seeing the way the Rider direction is going with re-signings. They're re-signing key players from last year. And maybe they're getting rewarded. Most of them.
What about Lucius Purifoy? What about Duke Williams?
But there's also a two-way street, Rob. They may not want to come back. There's also that, too. We always kind of think they want to come back and be Riders because they say all the right things. But they may say, look, I got a 1-year deal, and 10 to 15 grand is a pretty significant bump for that in their minds. Mind you, if you live in Vancouver, moving from Regina, it's a significant bump that's gone in living wages.
Probably living in Toronto with that, or Montreal.
Cost of living and that kind of stuff. But it is a two-way street. Like Duke Williams and Lucius Purifoy, and who's the other one I was thinking of? Who's the other? Micah Johnson. They've got to test. They're obviously, I think, they're going to test the market now.
Well, they're in the window period, so why wouldn't they?
And they'll see what's out there, and they may want to go there. So it's a two-way street. The players are perfectly allowed to look and see what's out there, and maybe that's the whole thing. Now, having said that, of those three, Rob, who do they got to sign? Who would you say of Lucius, Micah, or Duke Williams? Who's their must signing?
I would think it'd be Duke Williams. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the catalytic effect he had on the passing game when he showed up, it's not like they turned into an aerial circus overnight, but there was virtually nothing going on before they got Duke Williams. Micah Johnson is 34 years old this year, so you have to consider maybe there's a decline, but he played better at age 33 than he did at age 31 for the Rough Riders.
He didn't have that high ankle sprain too.
Lucius Purifoy's a tremendous player. I'm not sure what the market will be for him, but defensive backs seem to be a little more replaceable than a anchor of a defensive line or a go-to, a number one wide receiver. And you got to remember where the precedent was, or how the precedent was set in 2013, and Brendon LaBatt made all those numbers work, and there wasn't a player they wanted that got away. Yeah. So now they had the luxury then of the multi-year contracts, being able to sign players in 2012 and know that they're under contract for 2013. The foundation was set when they signed Brendon LaBatt and Dominic Picard in 2012. Exactly, they brought in Corey Sheets. They brought in Taj Smith. They drafted Ben Heenan. They made a lot of moves in 2012 that paid off handsomely in 2013. And they were also able to defer some of the money into 2014. So whereas one-year contracts weren't even permissible in 2013, now they're in vogue. So it's a bit of a different dynamic. But Brendon LaBatt did an amazing job making the numbers work in 2013. And now it's incumbent upon Jeremy O'Day, who basically was mentored by Brendon LaBatt as a general manager, to take what he saw in 2013 and apply it in the current context.
I remember back then, too, that Brendon LaBatt never got a chance to really adjust those salaries because he got fired in 15 when he thought he had an opportunity when he paid these salaries that he'd get it all back in 15, and then he got fired. So that kind of...
there were some players who earned a lot more in 2014 than in 2013. John Chick, I presume one of them. I think Chris Getzlaf was over $200,000 in 2014, whereas he played for a lot less in 2013, etc. There were some contractual contortions performed by Brendon LaBatt that I'm not sure Jeremy O'Day can even do.
How can you do that with one-year contracts?
Well, that's the thing, you can't. You got to entice them into signing a 2-year contract, and then you've got to backload the contract, and then you've got to basically convince them that they're just not going to cut you after 1 year. Yeah. And look at Weston Dressler in 2015. He signs a 4-year contract, and they dump him after 1 year. Mm-hmm. So I mean, what incentive is there for a player to sign in good faith for more than 1 year when you're just eminently expendable after it's a year by year business?
That's the sport. That's the sport. Football is 1 year contracts.
Unless you're a coach or a GM.
Yeah.
And there's the inherent unfairness of the entire equation.
Yeah. What do you think yesterday with the big news with Cody restructuring his contract? You and I were both kind of chatting back and forth on emails about it. Did he take a pay cut, or is he just taking sort of like a restructuring?
He's taking more in a bonus, which is less taxable.
That's what he did before, because he restructured his contract before and did similar things where he restructured it by takes more but less taxes, and they kind of look. And so, and you have to remember, taxes are a big thing.
Yeah. So I mean, what is the net gain or loss here? That's the question. Now, what's really admirable though is that Cody Fajardo has now signed 4 different contracts with the Rough Riders, and he's played 2 seasons. I mean, he signed on February 14th, 2019, the first contract. October of 2019, he signed the extension. January of last year, the contract was redone, and now late January of this year, the contract is redone. So I mean, his malleability is admirable.
One thing that has me scratching my head is why wasn't another year stuck onto it? That's what makes me wonder if it's more of a restructuring tax thing than it is an actual pay cut. Because people jumped on the immediate word of pay cut, and I was uncomfortable doing that because we don't know for sure.
Yeah, and we don't.
We don't. I
Why
mean,
was another year added? Well, again, it goes back to what we were talking about before. Where's the incentive for a player to sign for more than 1 year?
yeah.
And
But
I'll
he
bet
did
you,
already.
you
He
know,
did.
I
He
mean, he's
signed
done
21.
that already, but
Yeah.
maybe if you're Cody Fajardo, you're betting on yourself. If you're Cody Fajardo, you're looking. You said McLeod Bethel Thompson signed for basically $400,000. This is McLeod Bethel Thompson. So if you're Cody Fajardo, you're betting on yourself, and you're thinking, if I have a big year, then I can get back into a higher strategy or higher salary echelon. And even if I don't have a big year, probably the worst you can do is make the $400,000 that McLeod Bethel Thompson's making. So my suspicion here is that Cody is betting on himself.
But they also think, like Brett Lawler mentioned it yesterday, and we talked about, he took a bit of a pay cut. He said he took a bit of a shave. So maybe that money can be used on getting other players to try to win right now. Now, how are you guaranteed that's going to happen? Which is a very altruistic thing to do of Brett. But how do you know they're actually going to use that money to spend on another player? You don't. You trust
And
them.
again, if you're asking these players to cut salaries, I think the obligation of the players then is to spend the money you can spend as opposed to pocketing it. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, it goes back to my earlier comment on this very tangential Tuesday of spend to the cap. Otherwise, why, you're asking players to take a bit of a haircut. I think implicit in that is I think the very fair assumption that they will spend that money to improve the team elsewhere. So don't sit on any of that money. Spend it.
Yeah, but pay cuts and things have been part of CFL for you and I as long as we can remember. We all have these horror stories of a veteran coming in and saying, "Thanks a lot for your great season. We're only going to pay you this much instead of what you made last year," and it's either take it or leave it.
Yeah.
So the CFL is kind of heartless in that way when it comes to salaries.
But in fairness to the teams, they're doing what the collective bargaining agreement allows them to do. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a situation where the CFL Players Association has got to assume some of the burden here too, and some of the responsibility, and really make a stand for an environment for the players that is more equitable.
Yeah, they try. How far ahead do you think they get?
Well, it's proven to be a pretty ineffectual union, because I think that the management, the teams know that eventually these players, there isn't the unity there that other unions would seem to have. I don't think they have the prospect of that much solidarity. These players don't have the kind of reserves built up that would allow them to withstand a brief work stoppage, let alone one that is protracted. So I think the league knows that, and there's only a certain extent to which the CFLPA can dig in its heels before it's caving. It's also a different membership than a NHL Players Association or MLB Players Association, because you've got very disparate backgrounds. You've got a lot of players who are American, and I'm sure their aspiration in college is not to eventually become a member of the CFL Players Association. They want to use this as a way station and hopefully get back to the NFL or get to the NFL. So they don't have any acquired loyalty to the Canadian Football League and by extension the Players Association. So you're not going to get a lot of the American players, I think, singing "We Shall Not Be Moved" in a union in a labor.
How many American players are actually on the CFLPA? I know Solomon Aluminium is the president.
Aluminium.
Yes, he is the president of the CFLPA.
I think Keon Raymond was more involved. So we're seeing that. It used to be a union basically headed by Canadian offensive linemen.
Yeah,
and we're seeing a bit of a shift away from that.
I hope maybe people are wondering, are you petting Candy while you're?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just looking and seeing my short. This is Candy.
Because I'm watching you wiggle and shiggle. It looks like oh, that's a nice shot.
Isn't she adorable?
Yes.
She's the sweetest dog. So that's why my left arm is.
Yeah, I haven't
developed this tick. I just have a very cute, needy dog.
How about that's a good time to take a bit of a break, Rob? What do you think?
Yes, let's do that, and I'll tell Candy how beautiful she is, and then we'll resume my ranting, and might even talk about something other than me ranting. We'll be back in a second. I need a drink of water.
Okay. And we're back. So we were both back.
We're back with the Rider Rantings Rumblings pod. I don't know what.
Who put thumbtacks in my cereal?
Man, sorry.
Kind of you've kind of been a lot of thinking going on while you're laying in bed, petting Candy, thinking of all these opinions and stuff. But
I don't know. I mean, I've had all these pent up little opinions that we haven't had a chance to really promulgate for a while, given the hiatus that Brighter Rumblings has been on. We haven't done one since the week after the Grey Cup. So
it's hard to believe it's February too. Holy smokes!
Goodness, January is awful. I'm so glad January is over with.
Going out like a lion to steal one from March, but holy smokes, last night was kind of wild.
That was unbelievable. How do the Riders look going into free agency, Murray? I think they've done a good job of re-signing players. There's always going to be a few that they haven't signed, and it's not to suggest that the ones that are unsigned will remain so. And from a Rough Rider perspective, but overall, I think they've done a pretty solid job of signing up or getting a lot of the key pieces in place.
We look at AC Leonard's been re-signed. Mike Edem has been re-signed. I had the list for 2 years. Lawler for 2 years. For 2 years.
Or Shaq
Jamal
Evans.
Morrow. I think Jamal Morrow may turn out to be one of those kind of below the radar signs. You know, we saw he did so well. It gives him an option if, say, William Powell doesn't come back. And William Powell, I like the idea of bringing him back. I think he's still got some life left in those legs. You forget he started his CFL career kind of late, and he's had an injury. He didn't have he wasn't, I don't know if he was the best running back in the league last year. He was one of the best receiving backs in the league last year, I think. And he blocks well, so bring him back. And you can maybe get him back. He keeps some continuity on defense. You know, they're still going to probably have two among the best defensive ends in Woodard and Leonard. Micah Tights is back, another great signing. Nick Marshall's back. I'm trying to think of off the top of my head.
Dion Lacey is another one that is as yet unsigned, and that's a pretty important piece.
We can throw all of those 4 Achilles injuries guys into the so-called free agent pile because Larry Dean, Freddie Bishop III, Nelson Lacombo, and the running back Jonathan Femi Cole. They didn't get to use them, so they're free agents and stuff. But they could be guys that come back. I think we forget about Larry Dean and how good he was as a middle linebacker, and if they get him back, they can probably let Dion Lacey go. But same token,
Larry Dean's 34 this year, coming off Achilles. That's a pretty big ask.
But if Larry Dean goes, they have Dion Lacey, which is great. So and then there's a way to look on maybe at they could use a sand linebacker. I think Jay Deburn played well and is on the Olympic bobsled team, which is kind of saying something about his athleticism. I don't know if you just push as hard as you can, you go for a ride down the hill. But
gravity takes its course. Lean left, lean right.
Yeah, but good for him. That's an amazing accomplishment for a guy to do that. For he managed to juggle those 2 sports and be good enough to go to the Olympics on the Canada's 3rd sled. But I forgot where I was going. Oh yeah, they kind of need a Sam, I think. And man, I don't know if you don't get Doug Williams. Let's go back for Derek Moncrief. Derek Moncrief was Edmonton's best player last year on a horrible team and did some great things. Why not bring him back? He was arguably in 19, he was the best defensive player. Does so many things so well. He's got a bit of a connection to Regina too. His girlfriend's from Regina. So maybe he'd be willing to come back, maybe give him a little hometown discount a little bit for that. So what about, I don't know, that's a thought I have.
Ed Gainey's also unsigned, right?
Gainey, that's a hard one to decide because you keep thinking Ed Gainey keeps getting older and you keep thinking, geez, he's not playing as well as he did last year. And then you watch in this season, you go, hey, he still plays pretty well. I thought Ed
Gainey had a pretty good year last year.
Yeah, I know. And he's so impactful. And I know it's not measured on the field, in the locker room. And we're not aware of that because last year everything was Zoom. But he really is a leader on the team. Guys look up to him. And why not bring him back? Absolutely a good, solid guy who's getting older, like 30-somethings to be this.
I 32 this year.
32. I keep scratching my head over the backup quarterback.
Is that what happened? There's a one-liner there. Sorry, I won't. I
keep wondering what's going to happen with the backup quarterback, which is always one of those interesting questions. That boy, they must be set if they're talking about the backup quarterback. But I would say they've given up. They've moved on for Isaac Harker. I think the indication we saw last year with what happened with Mason Fine taking over him towards the end of the season, playing that game, kind of means despite everything that Isaac Harker does and what a great person he is, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not there. So who do they replace him with? He can maybe go a little cheaper. I kind of like this Matthew Schultz guy from Montreal. I think has the experience. He's not as experienced as Like I'm writing off the guys like Trevor Harris, Jeremiah Mazzoli, because I don't think the Riders are ever going to go after them and can't afford to go after them.
No, they can start somewhere.
They're going to start somewhere. So you bring a guy who's going to be in to back up and maybe do some good things. Now, maybe Matthews, I don't know. That's just my thoughts, folks. It's nothing.
Well, Schultz would seem to be sort of a good kind of mid-tier backup. He's not going to really pose a severe threat to your starter, but he's a good fallback, as he showed in Montreal last year.
I'm trying to remember. I know I keep leading on you for this stuff. James Franklin, was that 19 signing or was that an 18 signing?
He was a 19 and 20 signing.
Yeah, so he was signed as to be a backup.
The contracts to games played ratio is infinity for James Franklin.
Yeah. But he was willing to play that role, which is a good role, I think, for him. And it's a good, and I see Schultz doing that same thing. So maybe that's the
kind of profile I think we're looking at there.
Yeah.
Ideally.
We throw the thing out too, and people are going to, some people said to me, I was at SAFE, what about Andrew Harris? There's a guy who's a free agent. He's 35. He's done great things. He had a great playoff run, that's for sure. But great playoff game. But I don't think the Riders are going to spend their money on that kind of. So I don't think they're going to look for the top tier free agents. It'll be kind of more like almost like they look for the NFL guys who are not your big card, the kind of second guys, the third guys on the depth chart. If they get that kind of thing, maybe look for money that gives them some bang for their buck, and they still have 40 odd guys under contract. There's still a whole bunch of guys under contract who can contribute, like the Onika brothers who can do that, the Herdman Reed brothers who really. What have we seen from them on special teams? Charbel DeBeer.
Charbel DeBeer,
sorry. Great defensive tackle. With Mac Henry's still in there. So they need, okay, we're back to Duke Williams, and they need help on the offensive line. But they signed that Natty Rogers guy who was a good tackle. And I hate to say with Ottawa because there's not much good to say about Ottawa, but he might be a good guy who can step in there.
If Taron Vaughn can come back, that's a really big re-signing. If Taron Vaughn can play like the 2019 version, he's re-signed, but can he? He will have gone basically 3 years without playing football by the time he's back, and he's had a pretty serious injury that kept him out for the year. If Taron Vaughn can play like the 2019 version, then 4/5 of their offensive line is taken care of, and you just got to worry about right tackle, and that's.
You can't find a right tackle. Yeah, like there's out there. There's Mark Corte, a couple of guys for the Red Blacks. Mark Corte is pretty good. He can play tackle and he can play center, which gives you a little backup. And he's only 25, I think, so he's got some years left. So, and they also don't forget there's still a guy lurking in the background, and Brendon LaBatt. He's still signed through this season.
I would be very surprised.
I would be shocked too.
He turns 36 later this year. He hasn't played football since 2019.
Probably enjoying
I think
life.
that is just come and gone.
Yeah, but he's
next stop Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but you never say never.
If they ever induct a Canadian player again in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Do you want to get into that? No, we don't want to get into that. Let's let that slide a little bit. But he can, and how effective he's going to be, and they still have. Evan Johnson, Logan Ferland is playing as well as any guard can play in the league right now. And Dan Clark's a little bit older and had a couple of little, he still seems to be relatively healthy and playing and on, and he's got so much respect among the organization. That's good for Dan Clark. So right tackle is big, but you got to be able to find a right tackle.
That's fillable.
Yeah, and Brett Boyko is out there as a free agent. He's probably going to get just free agency, but as one of the things I'm learning through free agency in the CFL is you never say never because you never know what's ever going to happen.
Chris Jones is back in Edmonton. That's the CFL. What about John Ryan?
Well, I don't think there's anybody better than him out there as a free agent. But they have Corey Vedvik, who did well in the regular season. What did he do in the playoffs, Rob? You love that throwing that
29.5 yard average on 4 punts in the West Final.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing this in a way. It's a very cagey thing to do. If you got to dress one of these global players, you might as well put them in a position where they can do something as opposed to being a mannequin. Mm-hmm. And Corey Vedvik during the regular season actually performed pretty well.
Yeah.
But then come the playoffs and the hang time is like a split second, and the punts are going nowhere. Grey Cup's in Regina. John Ryan can still kick.
What a story
I think you bring back John Ryan.
Yeah.
I think.
does he want to come back? And I'm not saying he doesn't, but he's got a pretty good life going down in the States now with Sarah. He's following her around on the comedy circuit.
If he wants to play, I think you bring him back.
Yeah, it's up to him if he wants to play.
I mean, John Ryan, he's shown he still has the leg. There's no reason to think that he doesn't. I would hope that they would bring John Ryan back. I would hope that they'd end this whole global charade immediately. I'm hoping for too much.
Well, Well, more teams are using it. Cody Grace was a pretty good punter in Calgary. That was a good find. He'll be in the NFL. I think he'll be in the NFL. He had hang time. I wonder what happened with Vedvik, because maybe the temperature dropped a lot and he just couldn't handle the cold temperatures.
Well, that's why you want somebody who was born in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, punting for you. Yeah. The most important games of the year, and somebody's never punted in this before. And surprise, surprise, you'd be much better off plucking any punter out of Canadian college football than what you had in the playoffs.
And John would so love doing the Regina stories. he gets a little tired of that angle being dragged down, but he's very cooperative. I'm not saying he's not, but you can see that his eyes roll a little bit when we ask him about that. But hey, he's a Regina guy, and it would be just an incredible way to cap his career by playing in a Grey Cup game or being in the run up to a Grey Cup like that. I mean, they should be in that thing.
Where do you think Duke Williams is going to go? I mean, there's a lot of talk about Edmonton. I mean, he's excelled there before. There's Chris Jones, although Duke Williams isn't 114 years old like some of the other receivers they've signed in the past week. So that may may disqualify him. But
I'm going back here. Yeah, I think he's going to come back here. I think he's going to test the market. He's going to see what's out there, and then he's going to look around and say, some of the grass is pretty green and white. I'm going to come back to the Rough Riders for the amount of money and see what I can do for another season with Shaq Evans and Kai Moore. Now, that's just based on my own large gut feeling of that. Will he go to Edmonton? Possibly. Will the other teams be interested? But I think he showed
if Winnipeg loses Kenny Lawler, you would think they would make him
for Kenny Lawler? Do you think Lawler's more of a different style of receiver than?
Well, you're looking at a 1A receiver, and so if they lose Kenny Lawler, where do you go to find somebody whose production can even approximate with that which Kenny Lawler gives you? You go get Duke Williams. Who else is going to do that on the market?
Yeah. So that's true. But maybe the Riders are going to open up the bank and say, wouldn't that make a splash on the first day of free agency as you sign Duke Williams back?
Or take Kenny Lawler away from Winnipeg. Wouldn't that be funny?
Yeah.
I mean, something's got to give in Winnipeg because suddenly they're paying more money for some of the players that took a few haircuts last year, and maybe that bumps Kenny Lawler out of the equation. Maybe that bumps Andrew Harris out of the equation.
I was trying to find a game-breaking receiver among the free agents. I don't really see one that makes my eyes just bug out. There's some really good ones.
I see Duke Williams.
And Kenny Lawler. And then I had another name written down here. Well, I was thinking about this. This is just I'll probably pronounce this name wrong. Javon Coe, the Canadian slot back for the BC Lions. Big body guy like Brayden Lenius, a Canadian. Showed some potential last year. He could come in and maybe be a possible replacement for Brayden Lenius.
And that's a void we haven't really talked about much, but that's a really unique type of body type that he possessed. Yeah. And where is there that type of hybrid player?
Cody, that's it. And I said, I looked through the names. I go, I kind of like his numbers. I had his stats written down, but I can't read them. But he's another, an option there because they have good Canadians. Like Mitch Picton's back. Justin McGinnis is back. Keon Schaefer Baker's back. Who's the other guy? Jake Hardy.
Jake Hardy's back.
Jake Hardy's back. He's a great special teams player. You got to get, and you got to have him. Got to have someone to make tackles. And Keon LaFrance is another guy at the back. So maybe that's an option that they look at. A Canadian receiver like that who can come in and maybe adapt and work out the same chemistry with Cody Fajardo. So
and if you don't, then you've got to tweak your ratio from the way it existed last year. So that's another factor too. Is that,
what do you think of the? We're going to go for a little bit from players. Jason Maas re-ups gets 2 years. Jason Shivers gets 2 years. Paul Jones gets 2 years. Keeps them kind of in lockstep with. O'Day and Dickinson. Sorry, but what do you think of them re-upping the staff like that? What do you think that Maas earned another year? Earned a 2-year deal?
Well, the early returns were not that encouraging, but when you consider the degree to which the offense was impeded by injuries, most severely on the offensive line. I'm not sure that you can fairly evaluate Jason Moss on the basis of last year. That's the key. Without an offensive line, I think that really impeded the options available to Cody Fajardo and Jason Moss. I think it's almost the same evaluation. How do you appraise Cody Fajardo when the offensive line was what it was? That's a poorly constructed sentence. How do you appraise Jason Moss on the same basis? I think one of the things that they can both benefit from is more speed. And that's why I think maybe they have to move on from William Powell. I think that offense really needs some speed, especially if you're looking at Kyran Moore coming off the kind of injury that he might not begin the season. Where is somebody who can go from point A to point B really quickly? And I'm not sure they have that player. They certainly don't have that player on the offensive backfield unless they can find some ways to use Jamal Morrow on offense.
But he's so valuable on returns, and Craig Dickinson is reluctant to have guys play both.
Maybe he can be as valuable on offense. I think they need some spark as far as the running game goes. I think they need somebody who give him a sliver and he might take it a long way. And I don't think they have that. I don't think teams go into a game against the Rough Riders thinking we've got to stop William Powell. And I think they need a running back that's going to make teams say, okay, we've got to account for him. And then it opens up myriad opportunities as far as play action. It makes the running game more of a factor. I think the fact that William Powell hasn't re-signed is pretty telling as far as his future with the football. I think he
waited late in the process before. He's been done through this.
But I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, I was wondering about William Powell a year ago going to his age 33 season, and his production was okay. But I mean, you look at the average per carry; it's in the low fours. Is that a William Powell issue, or is that an offensive line issue? Probably a combination of both.
Yeah, that's probably both.
But they need some major speed on offense. They don't really have it. Kyran Moore has a lot of speed. They really didn't take advantage of that last year. They couldn't take advantage of the speed that is possessed by Shaq Evans, but I don't think he's a pure burner. He wins a lot of 50-50 competitions for balls. He's able to get open deep based upon 2019, but I don't think he's this absolutely electric 4.340 yard dash guy. They need somebody who can give them the kind of injection of fuel.
But which one are we going to get too? And I'm not saying that he's lost his step or anything, but do we get the Shaq Evans that finished off the season? In the playoffs where he was basically a decoy, not even a decoy because it didn't look like they tried to cover him. Or do we get Shaq Evans from 19?
I mean, Shaq Evans went into the playoffs with more yardage receiving wise than he finished the playoffs with, because he had one catch for -4 yards in 2 playoff games. I think I would bet on Shaq Evans there. Now he's 31 years old this year, but I would look at last year and just say write it off. I mean, I don't think it's fair to judge Shaq Evans on the basis of 2021. He was injured in week 2, and he played through an injury that is just bound to hamper someone. Don't forget the game in Calgary, when they won the game in Calgary. Shaq Evans made a huge catch late to enable the Riders to go to the victory formation and just run out the clock. He was also wide open for a touchdown in that game and was overthrown. He looked fine early in the season before he got hurt. So, I mean, you got to think that I don't think you could have expected Shaq Evans to just come in and do Shaq Evans things after suffering a broken leg. Honestly, that's quite the big ask. Give him a full off season, and I think you're going to see. I don't know if we'll ever get to see 1,334 yards again, because I'm not even sure the CFL is explosive enough to allow for that. Yeah. But I think we can expect 1,000 yards from Shaq Evans this year.
That also brings in, remember when it seemed to be a broken leg every other game?
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was just amazing.
DJ Flick and Andy Fantu, just on and on and on and on. And then, oh my goodness. Yeah. And 2009 they had the broken. I can't remember if it was a fibula or a tibia, but Weston Dressler gets hurt.
Yeah.
I think in week 4 in the Riders' 14th game. Do you think Weston Dressler would have tipped the balance in a Grey Cup game that was decided by 1 point?
Yeah. I remember
So,
Rob Bagg wasn't around for the end of that game either.
Yeah, the
'Cause he broke
Riders'
his
last
collarbone.
offensive play of that game, and he broke a collarbone.
Yeah.
So,
So there's, hey, look
um,
at you, look at me, I can remember stuff. Woo woo!
yay.
My brain is totally dysfunctional.
Um,
But just let's touch a little bit on the NFL. I know it's not Riders, but we can want to touch a little bit on that. Just
Tom Brady retires.
Tom Brady. Yeah, well, I'll see that, believe it when it comes. But I think it was
Well,
on
he
Instagram.
he tweeted today that he's retired.
I was watching on the NFL Network say some guy had gone through the whole thing that he retired. It says never once says retired. So,
Well, what he posted today was pretty. He said he can't make the commitment for blah blah blah.
There's lots of people that hate him. I admire for what he did. He should be just, from basically a 6th round draft pick to arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play in the NFL. Pretty good for him.
It's amazing when you look at it, though. If Drew Bledsoe doesn't get hurt,
yeah, I know. Yeah, we're old enough.
What happens? Now, look at the Rough Riders history, and if Marcus Crandall doesn't get hurt in week 2 against BC, and then Stephen Giles doesn't come in and not play well, does Darian Durant ever get his chance?
Yeah.
It's by no means am I equating Darian Durant and Tom Brady, but you're talking about a quarterback who was a pretty big deal around here for a long time, but it took a few factors for Tom Brady to become Tom Brady. At one point, he was behind Michael Bishop on the New England Patriots depth chart.
Yeah.
So, but things happen, and you take advantage of them, but if you don't get that break, is anybody talking about Tom Brady?
Exactly. But you and I,
who's Cody Fajardo if Zach Collaros doesn't get hurt in week 1?
They always talk about breaks. Like the last couple of weekends, the NFL has served up some pretty entertaining football.
Oh my goodness.
Just been absolutely riveting. I know some days I try to work and have football in the background. Between Canada's soccer game, curling, and 2 NFL games, it was a full Sunday of sports. And I just watching the NFL. Who would have the Kansas Chiefs go to overtime again? It's just beyond belief, the entertainment value and the quarterback value and the athleticism. And the athleticism of tight ends in the NFL just continues to blow me away. Those great big dudes, are 6'4", 240, 250, and they move like receivers, like running backs. They're just amazing to watch. I love watching tight ends in the NFL, and good quarterbacking. But
Super Bowl, who you got?
Well, unfortunately, if you see all this Steelers stuff in my background, is I can't cheer for the Bengals because I'm too busy hating them.
How can anybody hate the Cincinnati Bengals? You hate Bambi too?
Yeah, that's because Marion said
you hate puppies and ice cream and oxygen?
Because it's true. I don't hate them as much as I hate the Browns. I don't hate them as much as I hate the Ravens. But I do have an intrinsic dislike for them. So because of that, I'm going to lean towards the Rams. I love what the Rams do. I'm kind of cheering for Matt Stafford. Any guy that suffered through life in Detroit as long as he has deserves an opportunity to step up. And he does have his foibles. He throws the ball, throws inopportune interceptions. But let's cheer for Matt Stafford. And I like Aaron Donald too. I think he's a great defensive tackle. But
yeah, I haven't really. The Matt Stafford story to him, coming out of Detroit, and his wife Kelly had a brain tumor, I think 3 years ago, and the Detroit, and they were just both so. There wasn't a lot to celebrate about the Detroit Lions for a long time, but Matt Stafford and his wife sure put a lot into that community. Joe Burrow, one-time Rough Rider neg lister. I don't know who I think is going to win, and I don't know who I want to win. I like the fact that there's some freshness to the Super Bowl. It's not Tom Brady and it's not Bill Belichick anymore. It's not Denver, so I'm not happy. But either way, you're getting a team that's there. I always cheer for the team that, I guess I'm talking myself into this. I always cheer for the team that's never won before, because I was a fan of the 0-4 Denver Broncos once upon a time. So I have a soft spot for the Minnesota Vikings and the Buffalo Bills, and as a result, the Cincinnati Bengals. So it'd be cool to see the Bengals win one. Yeah. But if you look at Matthew Stafford, I think it's an example of someone who you never thought would win a Super Bowl, as long as he's in that situation. I look at the Super Bowl though, and LA is built for this year. They've got Jalen Ramsey, they've got Aaron Donald. They went out and got Von Miller. They've got the quarterback that they wanted to get. Cooper Kupp is amazing.
Oh, just amazing.
It's a shame that Robert Woods isn't playing, because then I could call out the Robert Woods Sr. once tried out for the Rough Riders in 1981 column. But I had a chance to see Cooper Kupp play in 2015. I went down to the University of Montana and watched the Grizzlies play Eastern Washington. And a senior on Eastern Washington at the time was Cooper Kupp. I went down there thinking I was going to be watching the Grizzlies, and all I could do was watch Cooper Kupp lacerate the Montana secondary. And I thought, at that time, okay, he's not playing for a major college. I thought, boy, wouldn't Cooper Kupp be a nice CFL player? Well, look at him now. Just the most amazing pass patterns you'll ever see.
And his touchdown made it look easy, but it wasn't easy by any stretch. 2 touchdowns on the weekend, that's it.
So I'm hoping, but I think I'm hoping for Cincinnati will win, but I think the Rams will. I haven't asked my dog yet, but she was 0-2 last weekend, so her opinions don't really count anymore.
We all have bucket lists of things we want to do, and I want to go to Heinz Field to see a Steelers game. I've never seen one, but boy, do I want to go to SoFi Stadium.
Well, does that look like a palace?
Does that like? And I thought AT&T Stadium and the Dallas Stadium was amazing, and the Raiders Stadium looks just like an incredible place to be in Las Vegas. But that's SoFi Stadium, and I read a really cool story, and I know it's not related, about how they had to switch over from being the NFC Championship game to the Super Bowl game with no time. Like they started Monday morning, they took the ball, basically the confetti flew, and then they started switching it over because of all the sponsorship and stuff, and it was pretty cool thing. And it looks like it's going to be really pricey tickets, but it's still going to be well, I think I'll be watching the Tankard on the 13th, though, if I'm not wrong. But been many a
dynamic life of Murray McCormick.
I can't count how many times I watched the Super Bowl in some hotel room in Saskatchewan after covering the women's curling championships, because they used to have it around this time.
I watched one in Mexico once upon a time. They kept calling them the Patriotes. There was no English telecast.
Last time we were in Mexico, which was a long time ago, we watched the Brier final while we were there in a bar, and all these Americans were asking me about, what the heck are you watching? I was in Mexico one time when the World Junior final was on. There was a bunch of people in the little bar gathered around one guy who had a laptop watching the TSN live feed in Mexico. And it's like, a lot of these people are wondering what on earth is with these people. But there was like this guy should have charged everybody $5 to watch his his little screen. He would have made a killing. But I remember watching a Brier in an airport coming back from Mexico, and people around back. Marion had it on her phone, watching the final, and that, and people all around watching us. So anyway, Rob, I think we've talked enough.
I think we've squeezed that tube. If people are still with us, we thank them. And I will now read our little thingy. That's the technical term for it. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email me, rvanstone@postmedia.com, and we'll read it on the show. You can follow me at Rob Vanstone on Twitter, and Murray is on Twitter at MurrayLP. So that is the little thing I'm obligated to read. We're going to do this again next week, obviously. I'm not sure when yet. Depends when the free agent commotion subsides to the extent that we can take a breather and do this. But we're definitely going to do a podcast next week, whether it drops on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It will be done at some point during the week. So,
and I have to admit, I've become a big soccer fan. Man, I love watching Team Canada play. That was a great game on Sunday. Great goals, great goaltending. And we beat the Americans. Yes. Go Canada. That's soccer. That's a game, Rob.
That's the other football.
The other football, right.
Anyways, for Murray McCormick, the football footy, in addition to being the football foodie, given his sudden affinity for soccer, I'm Rob Vanstone with Candy, and we will do this next week when we'll, that'll be an interesting week next week. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us, and we will be back in a week's time or thereabouts. Take care and have a great day. Stay warm.